The advertisement in the Denver Post was simple enough. Successful rancher seeks refined lady for marriage of convenience. Mutual benefit assured. Discretion paramount. What it didn't mention was that Nathaniel Cross had placed it in desperation, with creditors breathing down his neck and his late father's gambling debts threatening to swallow the Cross Creek Ranch whole. The woman who answered changed everything. Victoria Ashford stepped off the afternoon stage in Willow Springs, Colorado territory, looking like she'd walked straight out of a Harper's Bazaar illustration. Her emerald traveling dress was perfectly pressed despite the dusty journey, her golden hair arranged in an elaborate chignon that probably cost more than most folks made in a month. She carried herself with the kind of confidence that came from never having to wonder where her next meal was coming from. "Mr. Cross, I presume?" Her voice carried the cultured tones of Eastern finishing schools and old money. Nathaniel removed his hat, suddenly conscious of his work-worn hands and sun-weathered face. "Miss Ashford, welcome to Willow Springs." She surveyed the dusty main street with its collection of weathered buildings and raised an elegant eyebrow. "Charming. Quite rustic." "It's honest work and honest people," he said, bristling slightly. "Oh, I wasn't criticizing." Her smile was dazzling and somehow calculating. "I find authenticity refreshing after the artificial world I've left behind." They walked to the hotel in companionable silence, Victoria's heels clicking against the wooden sidewalk. Nathaniel found himself stealing glances at her profile, wondering what had driven such an obviously refined woman to answer his advertisement. Over dinner at the hotel's modest restaurant, Victoria laid out her proposition with the precision of a business contract. "I understand you need a wife to satisfy certain financial obligations," she said, delicately cutting her beef. "And I need the respectability and protection that marriage provides." "Protection from what?" Her fork paused halfway to her mouth. "Let's simply say that my previous engagement ended in a manner that made remaining in Boston inadvisable." Nathaniel leaned back in his chair. "Scandal? The worst kind. The kind that follows a woman wherever she goes." She met his eyes directly. "But I can be exactly what you need, Mr. Cross. I know how to run a household, how to entertain guests, how to present the proper image of prosperity and respectability. I'll play your perfect wife in every way that matters. And in return? Security. A new name. A fresh start." She paused, then added with a wry smile, "And perhaps the chance to learn what it's like to live somewhere that doesn't judge a woman's worth solely by her ability to pour tea and look decorative." The next morning, they were married by Judge Morrison in a ceremony that lasted all of 10 minutes. Victoria signed her name with a flourish, and Nathaniel found himself wondering if he'd just made the smartest or stupidest decision of his life. The ride to Cross Creek Ranch took 3 hours through some of the most beautiful country in Colorado. Victoria sat beside him on the wagon seat, her back straight as a ramrod, taking in the rolling hills and distant mountains with what looked like genuine appreciation. "It's magnificent," she said softly. "I can see why you'd fight to keep it." "My father built this place from nothing," Nathaniel said. "Course, he also nearly lost it to nothing, thanks to his fondness for poker and whiskey. We all have our weaknesses, Mr. Cross." "Nathaniel, we're married now after all." She turned to look at him, and for a moment, her carefully composed mask slipped. He caught a glimpse of something vulnerable underneath, something that made his chest tighten unexpectedly. "Victoria," she said quietly, "though I suppose I should get used to being Mrs. Cross." As they crested the hill overlooking his ranch, Nathaniel felt a surge of pride. The house was modest but well built, surrounded by corrals and outbuildings that spoke of prosperity and hard work. Cattle dotted the pastures, and the late afternoon sun painted everything in shades of gold. "Welcome home, Mrs. Cross," he said. Victoria smiled, but Nathaniel couldn't shake the feeling that she was already planning something. What he didn't know was that his new wife had her own debts to pay, her own secrets to hide, and her own reasons for choosing a remote ranch in Colorado territory. Reasons that would soon turn his world upside down. 3 weeks into their marriage, Nathaniel had to admit that Victoria was everything she'd promised to be. She transformed his rough bachelor quarters into something approaching civilization, complete with curtains that actually matched and meals that didn't taste like leather. She charmed his ranch hands with her unexpected knowledge of horses and her willingness to roll up her sleeves when necessary, though she somehow managed to do it without getting a speck of dirt on her pristine dresses. What puzzled him was how she always seemed to have money for improvements, new china, better furniture, fabric for curtains, despite claiming to have arrived with nothing but her traveling bag. "Where exactly are these funds coming from?" he asked one evening, watching her arrange fresh flowers in a crystal vase he'd never seen before. "A lady has her ways," she replied with that mysterious smile that was becoming all too familiar. "Besides, isn't a wife supposed to make her husband's life more comfortable? Most wives don't do it with crystal that probably costs more than my prize bull." Victoria's laugh was like silver bells, but Nathaniel caught the slight tension in her shoulders. "You worry too much, Nathaniel. Can't you simply enjoy having a properly appointed home?" Before he could answer, hoofbeats thundered into the yard. Through the window, Nathaniel saw a rider approaching fast, too fast for a social call. He grabbed his rifle from above the mantel, a habit that had kept him alive more than once. The man who dismounted was tall and lean, with the kind of pale complexion that spoke of indoor work and city living. His expensive suit was travel-stained, and his eyes held the desperate look of a man who'd been riding hard for days. "Mrs. Cross," he called out, his voice carrying a distinct Boston accent. "I know you're in there, Victoria." Nathaniel felt Victoria go rigid beside him. When he looked at her, all the color had drained from her face. "Friend of yours?" he asked quietly. "More like a nightmare I thought I'd left behind." She moved to the window, peering out carefully. "That's Detective Morrison from the Boston Police Department." "Police?" Nathaniel's blood ran cold. "What the hell did you do back east?" Before Victoria could answer, the detective called out again. "Mrs. Ashford, or should I say Mrs. Cross now? I've come a long way to have a conversation with you. About the Pemberton jewelry theft." The words hit Nathaniel like a physical blow. He stared at his wife, seeing her clearly for perhaps the first time. The expensive clothes, the mysterious funds, the way she'd appeared in his life like an answer to prayer, it was all starting to make terrible sense. "You're a thief," he said quietly. Victoria's chin lifted defiantly. "I'm a survivor." "That's not an answer." "It's the only answer that matters." She moved away from the window, her composure cracking. "You wanted a wife who could play the part of respectability, Nathaniel. You never asked about the cost." Outside, Detective Morrison was growing impatient. "I can wait all day, Mrs. Cross. And all night if necessary. The Pemberton family is very eager to recover their grandmother's emerald necklace." Nathaniel felt like the ground was shifting beneath his feet. "How much did you steal?" $50,000 worth of jewelry." Victoria's voice was barely above a whisper. "From my former fiancé's family. The same family that destroyed my reputation and left me with nothing when they discovered my father had embezzled from their bank." "So you decided to get even?" "I decided to take what I was owed." Fire flashed in her green eyes. "Do you know what it's like to go from being the toast of Boston society to being treated like a leper overnight? To have doors slammed in your face by people who used to beg for invitations to your parties?" Nathaniel set down his rifle, his mind racing. "Where's the jewelry now?" Victoria hesitated, then walked to their bedroom. She returned with a small leather satchel that clinked softly when she set it on the table. Inside, nestled in black velvet, were the most beautiful pieces of jewelry Nathaniel had ever seen. Emeralds and diamonds that caught the lamplight like captured stars. "I was going to sell them gradually," she said. "Use the money to help you save the ranch, then disappear before anyone could trace them here. And leave me to face the consequences? You would have been innocent. I made sure of that." The detective's voice came again, closer now. "I'm losing patience, Mrs. Cross. Come out now and we can discuss this like civilized people." Nathaniel looked at his wife, this beautiful, complicated woman who'd lied to him from the moment they met, and realized he was facing the most important decision of his life. He could turn her over to the law and save himself, or he could stand by her and risk losing everything he'd worked for. "There's a back way out through the root cellar," he said quietly. "It leads to the old mine shaft. You could be in the mountains before he knows you're gone." Victoria stared at him in shock. "You'd help me escape?" "I'd help my wife," he said simply. "Though I'm starting to think I don't know who that is." Outside, Detective Morrison's footsteps approached the front door. Time was running out, and Nathaniel knew that whatever happened next would change both their lives forever. Detective Morrison's knock rattled the front door like gunfire. Nathaniel looked at Victoria, seeing fear and something else, hope, flicker across her face. In that moment he made a decision that surprised them both. "Go," he said, nodding toward the back of the house. "Take the jewelry and run." "Nathaniel, go. Now." Instead of moving toward the root cellar, Victoria did something that shocked him to his core. She picked up the leather satchel and walked straight to the front door. "What the hell are you doing?" Nathaniel hissed. "Something I should have done months ago." She opened the door before he could stop her. Detective Morrison stood on the porch, hat in hand, looking more tired than threatening. Up close, Nathaniel could see the man was probably in his 50s, with kind eyes and the patient demeanor of someone who'd seen enough of life's complications to understand that things weren't always black and white. "Mrs. Cross," Morrison said politely, "thank you for not making this more difficult than necessary." "Detective Morrison." Victoria's voice was steady. "I assume you've come about the Pemberton jewelry, among other things." Morrison's gaze shifted to Nathaniel. "Mr. Cross, I presume? I'm sorry to involve you in this mess, sir. I understand you may not have been aware of your wife's situation." "I'm aware now," Nathaniel said carefully. Victoria held out the satchel. "It's all here. Every piece." Morrison took the bag but didn't open it. "Mrs. Cross, before we proceed, there are some things you should know. About the Pemberton family. About your father." Victoria's composure cracked slightly. "What about my father?" "He didn't embezzle from the Pemberton Bank, ma'am. He was framed." The words hung in the air like smoke from a gunshot. Victoria swayed, and Nathaniel instinctively moved to steady her. "That's impossible," she whispered. "Charles showed me the evidence. The forged signatures, the missing funds. All fabricated by Charles Pemberton himself." Morrison's voice was gentle but firm. "Your father discovered Charles was embezzling from his own family's bank. When your father threatened to expose him, Charles turned the tables. Made it look like your father was the thief." Victoria's legs gave out and Nathaniel caught her, guiding her to a chair. Her face was white as fresh snow. "But my father confessed," she said weakly. "He killed himself rather than face the shame. He killed himself because Charles threatened to frame you as well if he didn't take the blame." Morrison sat down across from them, his expression compassionate. "Your father died protecting you, Mrs. Cross. He never stole a penny." Nathaniel felt Victoria trembling in his arms. The implications were staggering. She'd stolen from the very people who destroyed her family, not knowing they were the real criminals. "How do you know all this?" Nathaniel asked. "Charles Pemberton got careless. Started living too well, spending too freely. His own family became suspicious and hired investigators. When the truth came out..." Morrison shrugged. "Let's just say the Pemberton family is very interested in making amends." Victoria looked up, tears streaming down her face. "Amends? They want to restore your father's reputation, clear his name publicly. And they're prepared to offer substantial compensation for the damage done to your family." "How substantial?" Nathaniel found himself asking. Morrison smiled slightly. "Enough to buy several ranches, Mr. Cross. The Pembertons are very wealthy and very guilty." Victoria stood abruptly, pacing to the window. "And Charles?" "In prison. Embezzlement, fraud, conspiracy. He'll be there for a very long time." The silence stretched between them like a bridge neither was sure they wanted to cross. Finally, Victoria turned back to Morrison. "What happens now? To me, I mean." "That depends on you, ma'am. The Pembertons don't want to press charges. They're too embarrassed by their son's actions. As far as they're concerned, you were simply recovering property that should have been yours in the first place." Nathaniel felt a strange mix of relief and loss. Victoria was free to return to Boston, to reclaim her place in society, to live the life she'd been born to. She didn't need him anymore. "There is one condition," Morrison continued. "The Pembertons want to meet with you. To apologize personally and discuss the compensation. They've asked me to escort you back to Boston." Victoria looked at Nathaniel, and he saw his own thoughts reflected in her eyes. This was it, the end of their strange arrangement, their marriage of convenience that had somehow become something more complicated. "When do we leave?" she asked quietly. "We?" Morrison looked confused. "My husband and I," Victoria said firmly. "If the Pembertons want to apologize, they can apologize to both of us. Nathaniel is part of this now." Nathaniel stared at her. "Victoria, you don't have to." "Yes, I do." She moved to stand beside him, taking his hand. "I told you I'd play your perfect wife, Nathaniel. But somewhere along the way I stopped playing." Morrison cleared his throat diplomatically. "The train leaves Denver tomorrow evening. I'll arrange accommodations for both of you." After the detective left, Nathaniel and Victoria stood in their kitchen, the weight of revelation settling between them like dust after a storm. "You could have run," Nathaniel said. "Why didn't you?" Victoria smiled, and for the first time since he'd known her, it reached her eyes. "Because I finally found something worth more than freedom. I found home." Outside, the sun was setting over the mountains, painting the sky in shades of promise. Tomorrow they would face the past together. Tonight they had each other. The Pemberton mansion on Beacon Hill looked exactly as Victoria remembered, imposing, cold, and designed to intimidate. Standing beside Nathaniel on the marble steps, she felt like she was facing a firing squad rather than attending a social call. "Breathe," Nathaniel murmured, squeezing her gloved hand. "They're the ones who should be nervous." The butler who answered the door was the same one who'd thrown her out 18 months ago. His eyes widened in recognition, but his training held. "Mrs. Cross, Mr. Cross. The family is expecting you in the drawing room." The Pembertons were arranged like actors on a stage. Elderly Mr. Pemberton in his wheelchair, his wife perched on the edge of a silk settee, and their daughter Margaret standing by the fireplace. They all looked appropriately ashamed, which Victoria found oddly satisfying. "Victoria," Mrs. Pemberton rose, her hands fluttering nervously. "My dear, how can we ever?" "Don't." Victoria's voice was crisp as winter air. "Let's dispense with the theatrics, shall we? You destroyed my family based on your son's lies. My father is dead because of your accusations. No amount of apologies will change that." Mr. Pemberton wheeled himself forward. "You're absolutely right, my dear. Nothing we say can undo the damage. But we can try to make amends." He gestured to a stack of papers on the side table. "We've prepared a settlement offer. It includes full restoration of your father's reputation. We'll publish retractions in every newspaper that carried the original story. We're also prepared to offer financial compensation." Nathaniel picked up the papers, his eyebrows rising as he read. "This is substantial." $200,000, Mr. Pemberton said quietly. "It won't bring back your father, Victoria, but it might help you rebuild the life our son destroyed." Victoria felt dizzy. $200,000 was more money than she'd ever dreamed of. Enough to save Nathaniel's ranch 10 times over, enough to live like royalty for the rest of their lives. "There's one more thing," Margaret Pemberton spoke for the first time. "We'd like to offer Mr. Cross a position with our cattle operations in Wyoming. We've recently acquired several ranches out there, and we need someone with experience to manage them." Nathaniel stiffened beside her. "That's generous, but—" "The salary would be $50,000 a year," Mr. Pemberton interrupted. "Plus a percentage of profits. You'd have complete autonomy to run the operations as you see fit." Victoria watched her husband's face, seeing the war between pride and practicality playing out in his expression. It was an incredible offer, the kind of opportunity that came once in a lifetime. "We'll need time to consider," Victoria said diplomatically. "Of course. Take all the time you need." An hour later they were walking through Boston Common, both lost in thought. The autumn leaves crunched under their feet, and Victoria found herself remembering walks she'd taken here as a child, when the world had seemed full of endless possibilities. "It's a good offer," Nathaniel said finally. "It's an incredible offer. But—" Victoria stopped walking, turning to face him. "But I don't want their guilt money, Nathaniel. I don't want to spend the rest of my life being grateful to the people who killed my father. Even if it means financial security? A chance to live the life you were born to? What if I don't want that life anymore?" The words surprised her as much as they did him. "What if I want something different?" Nathaniel studied her face. "What do you want, Victoria?" "I want to go home. To our ranch. I want to raise cattle and grow vegetables and learn how to make bread that doesn't taste like cardboard." She laughed, surprising herself. "I want to be Mrs. Cross, not Miss Ashford. I want to build something real with you. The ranch is barely profitable. We'd be starting over with nothing." "Not nothing." Victoria pulled a folded paper from her reticule. "I've been thinking about this since we left Colorado. What if we took just enough of their money to pay off your father's debts and improve the ranch? What if we made them a counteroffer?" Nathaniel unfolded the paper, reading her careful notes. "You want to supply beef to their Wyoming operations? Why not? We know cattle, we know the land. We could build something sustainable, something that's ours." She paused, suddenly uncertain. "Unless you'd prefer the security of working for them?" Nathaniel's answer was to sweep her into his arms and kiss her right there in the middle of Boston Common, scandalizing several proper ladies and earning applause from a group of college boys. "Mrs. Cross," he said when they finally broke apart, "I think you're the smartest woman I've ever met. Smart enough to marry a stubborn rancher? Smart enough to see that some things are worth more than money." 3 days later they were on the train back to Colorado, having negotiated a deal that satisfied everyone. The Pembertons would clear her father's name and provide enough capital to modernize the ranch. In return, Cross Creek Ranch would supply beef to their Wyoming operations at a fair price. A business partnership, not charity. As the train pulled into Willow Springs, Victoria felt something she hadn't experienced in years: genuine happiness. The little town looked exactly the same, dusty, rough around the edges, and absolutely perfect. "Welcome home, Mrs. Cross," Nathaniel said, helping her down from the train. Victoria looked around at the familiar buildings, the wide sky, the mountains in the distance. "You know what the funny thing is?" "What's that?" "I came here planning to play your perfect wife. But somewhere along the way, I became her for real." Nathaniel smiled, the kind of smile that reached his eyes and warmed her heart. "Good thing, because I was starting to fall in love with her." "Starting to?" Victoria raised an eyebrow. "All right, completely and hopelessly in love with her." As they rode toward the ranch in their wagon, Victoria reflected on the strange journey that had brought them together. She'd come to Colorado running from her past, planning to use Nathaniel and disappear. Instead, she'd found something she'd never expected: a future worth fighting for. The sun was setting as they crested the hill overlooking Cross Creek Ranch, painting everything in shades of gold and promise. Home, Victoria thought. This was what home felt like. "Any regrets?" Nathaniel asked, following her gaze. Victoria smiled, thinking of the woman she'd been when she first stepped off that stage: desperate, angry, and convinced that love was just another word for weakness. "Only one," she said. "I regret that it took me so long to stop playing and start living." As they drove toward their house, their real home, Victoria Cross knew that sometimes the best things in life came disguised as the worst. Sometimes you had to lose everything to find what really mattered. And sometimes, if you were very lucky, you found someone willing to build a new life with you, one honest day at a time.